The late 1920s were a time of rapid change in America. The country had come out of World War I battered, but not broken. Women's suffrage was now a reality, and prohibition was in full swing, creating a lucrative new industry for organized crime. The early days of prohibition, it was estimated that only around 10% of the population supported the ban on alcohol, while 90% either drank or knew someone who did. And so with an endless supply of customers, the Mafia saw an opportunity to grow their criminal empire. Most people associate the Mafia with Italy, and for good reason. After all, the term Mafia comes from the Italian word mafi, meaning evil. The organization's roots can be traced back to Sicily, where it began as a means of protecting landowners from bandits and other criminals. But by the early 20th century, many Sicilians had emigrated to the United States, bringing their traditions with them. In particular, they brought the Mafia. When Prohibition came into effect in the U.S., it created a huge black market for alcohol. And so the Italian-American Mafia saw an opportunity to make a lot of money. However, the Chicago outfit was already well established in the bootlegging business and had most of the Midwest sewn up. For the Sicilians, this meant that if they wanted a piece of the pie, they would have to go to the West Coast. This move would change the face of organized crime forever. The year was 1929. On October, the Chicago outfit made a play for Detroit, sending over 50 men to seize the city's breweries. When news of the raid reached New York, the 5 families of the Mafia were thrown into turmoil. They had not been expecting such a brazen move from the Chicago mob, and it seemed as though their rivals were about to take over the entire Midwest. This was bad news for the Sicilians, who had been hoping to expand their own criminal empire. Something had to be done, and fast. So on November 15, 1929, a secret meeting took place in a private room at the tail of a restaurant in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Only 5 people attended, each representing one of the 5 families of the Mafia. Also present was Charles Lucky Luciano, Capo Regime, or captain of the Genovese crime family. Although he wasn't officially in charge yet, Luciano is considered to be the father of modern Mafia. He was the one who came up with the idea of the National Crime Syndicate, which would allow the various local crime families to work together as one big organization. Also in attendance was Frank Castellano, the acting boss of the Genovese family. Castellano was a powerful figure in the Mafia, and his approval was crucial if Luciano's plan was to succeed. Joseph Masiria, the boss of the Camato crime family, was another important presence at the meeting. Masiria was considered to be the most violent of the Mafia bosses, and he was known for his ruthless efficiency. Salvatore Maranzano, who headed the very crime family that would later bear his name, was also there. Finally, Vito Genovese, the head of the Genovese crime family, rounded out the group. Vito was known as a brilliant strategist, and his insight would prove invaluable during the discussions that took place that day. Once everyone had arrived, the topic of the meeting was quickly brought up: the threat posed by the Chicago outfit. The bosses discussed how Al Capone's men had seized most of the Midwest and were now encroaching on their turf. They needed to come up with a solution quickly, as the violence between the 2 mobs was only going to get worse. There were a few different options open to them. They could try to fight the Chicago mob head-on, but this seemed like a long shot. The outfit was flush with cash from their illegal activities, and they were unafraid to use it to their advantage. Another option was to seek out allies, but who could they possibly call on? The police were obviously out of the question, and most of the other crime families were sworn enemies. That left only one option: to join forces and create a national crime syndicate. This was a bold plan, but it just might be their best chance at success. If they could unite the various local crime families under one banner, then they would be able to pool their resources and manpower. They would also have a much stronger voice when dealing with law enforcement. The bosses agreed to give it a try. The meeting lasted for several hours, and by the end of it, they had worked out the basic structure of the syndicate. Each family would be run autonomously, with the bosses reporting to a national commission. This commission would be made up of one representative from each family, who would meet regularly to discuss strategy and allocate resources. It was a clever system, and one that would serve the Mafia well for many years to come. With the meeting over, the bosses went their separate ways. They knew that they had just created something truly special, and they were eager to start building their criminal empire. But before we move on, remember to hit that subscribe button. Over the next few months, the members of the Mafia began to put the plans made in Atlantic City into action. They reached out to their various associates and allies and started forming crews that would operate across state lines. This allowed them to expand their criminal activities to new areas, and also gave them the ability to transport goods and people more easily. The bosses also set up a number of front businesses that would help them launder the money they made from their illegal activities. This included legitimate businesses like restaurants and nightclubs, as well as shell companies that were used for nothing else but money laundering. With these measures in place, the Mafia was ready to start making some serious money. They targeted the lucrative bootlegging business, and soon had a large share of the East Coast market. Their success in this area alone funded a lot of other criminal activities, including gambling, prostitution, and extortion. Within a few years, the Mafia had become one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world. The meeting in Atlantic City had been a huge success, but it came at a cost. The bosses had to agree to share power and profits with each other, something that they were not used to doing. However, this proved to be a small price to pay for the benefits that the syndicate provided. The agreement also led to a decrease in violence between the families, as they were now working towards a common goal. Of course, this didn't mean that there was no more violence, as rival gangs and law enforcement were still a constant threat. But compared to the gang wars of the past, things were much calmer. Despite their success, the Mafia would eventually be brought down by internal strife. As the years went on, the families started to bicker and fight with each other more often. This led to a series of bloody gang wars that nearly destroyed the organization. Eventually, the government got involved and cracked down hard on the Mafia. Many of the top bosses were arrested and sent to prison, while others fled the country. The Mafia never really recovered from this setback. Although it still exists today, it's nowhere near as powerful as it once was. That secret meeting in Atlantic City had changed the course of Mafia history forever. It had created a national crime syndicate that had unprecedented power and influence. For a while, it seemed as though the Mafia would be unstoppable. But internal strife and government crackdowns would eventually bring the organization to its knees. Still, the legacy of the syndicate lives on, and it remains one of the most infamous crime organizations of all time. What do you think? Would you have joined the Mafia after that fateful meeting in Atlantic City? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our other content for more historical tales of crime and intrigue. Thanks for watching.